I'd like to start by asking you for your definition of a visionary.
Huh. So a visionary to me, and I don't consider myself a visionary, although I've started a few companies. A visionary is someone who takes the time to think differently and to imagine a future that's different than what people see today, right? So it's a little bit over the horizon. But I also think a visionary is someone who actually is pragmatic and gets something done. You know, anyone can dream about living on Mars or being an interplanetary species like Elon Musk talks about. But a true visionary actually makes progress towards achieving it, which he's doing, right, with Starship and other stuff. Because there's a lot of wishful thinkers out there who imagine something, but if you're not actually taking tangible steps to make it happen, I don't think you're a visionary.
And so you started by saying you don't consider yourself one, which is very contradictory to me based on that description you just gave. Why don't you consider yourself one?
Well, I don't think that the companies I've started have been particularly visionary or awe-inspiring. Yeah, the first company was a company called Orbitz, which some of your listeners may be familiar with. I suspect most of them aren't, which was just the idea of let's book airline tickets and hotel rooms online instead of going to airline ticket offices or travel agents. I don't know that that's particularly visionary, but it was a pretty good idea and it worked. And then the second company was Kayak, which took that and with the subtle changes said, hey, instead of just looking online and booking online, let's look for everything and let you book anywhere else you want to. And that became Kayak. And then later on was Open Table, which is making restaurant reservations online. And then SeatGeek, which is I'm on the board of. I didn't found it. That was about live events and sporting tickets online. So a pretty common theme, which was, I don't know it's visionary. It's just there's a new thing out there called the internet. This was 20 years ago, by the way, so it's not so new anymore. But let's enable that. Let's use that platform to enable purchasing behavior that before that happened offline. So I don't think that makes me a visionary. I think a lot of people saw the same thing. I just was lucky enough to surround myself with great teams, great investors, and we actually made it happen.
So what I'm hearing is maybe there's like a sliding scale of visionary. So someone who creates something entirely new, like the idea that we're going to live on Mars, that's pretty extreme. Yeah. But what you described is putting together something that never existed before, which is just based on your definition, just as visionary.
I guess you could say that. I don't feel like a visionary, When I read a book about Elon Musk, no one's ever going to write a book about me, thank goodness. But when I read a book about Elon Musk and others, Richard Branson, et cetera, very celebrated people who have started multiple businesses, multiple successful businesses, totally far afield. There's a common theme for the 3 or 4 that I've been involved with, which is migrating behavior online. It's totally different to start an electric car company, to do spaceships, to do Neuralink, to do all that other kind of cool stuff.
Have you ever thought about trying to become more visionary?
I don't think so. The answer is no, I haven't, because I've got my hands full with the endeavors I've got right now, and I try to balance my time on the work side also with taking care of 5 daughters and all that stuff. So work-life balance is really important to me.
Some of the research that I've been doing into what it means to be visionary, what it feels like to have a vision, and then to communicate it to other people, which I'd like to talk to you about based on the conception of Kayak. You need to be at a place personally where you're, I don't know if you want to use the word aligned or passionate or really feeling something new to have the idea and then communicate it in an energetic way that people actually feel, right?
Yeah.
Can you share with me kind of what was the situation pre-Kayak invention, pre-Kayak conception in your life? Like what was going on? Just were some of the signals leading up to that moment?
Yeah, look, we had just sold Orbitz. We had taken it public. So I had gotten a little bit of wealth, right, which took a lot of pressure off because I already had a family at that point in time, so I needed to pay bills, right? And I thought we could do Orbitz a little bit better with a slightly different tweak on the business model. And no one else is doing it. So, I quit my job there 2 weeks after the IPO, and took 2 weeks, wrote the business plan for Kayak, and started the company. And what I was thinking at the time was, well, if it fails, if it doesn't work, I can go back to consulting, or I can go get a job in corporate America. But I'm approaching the age and the debt load where if I didn't start another company then, I probably would be unlikely to start it later. So I just took the leap, and the initial business plan had a bunch of assumptions, which the VCs who looked at it said, "This is crazy. We don't buy any of it," and it turned out to actually be right. So with Orbitz, we raised $200 million. Didn't get to break even until we had spent $195 million of it. With Kayak, we raised $200 million, but we broke even after $7 million of loss. So it was just a good idea. And personally, I was at the stage of my career journey where I think a good leader has self and situational awareness. So it's you read a lot in the media about these visionaries who are kind of almost at the threshold of being assholes.
Right.
They're so self-confident, so aggressive that they'll burn their people out to reach their goal because they're so confident about their goal. I think the vast majority of successful entrepreneurs aren't like that at all, actually. I think they realize they have a pretty good idea, but they have a good grasp of what they're good at and what they're not good at. They seek to build a team that complements their strengths and weaknesses. And then they have the situational awareness that, when they're trying to communicate a vision or path to someone, they know what's going to work in terms of motivating them. Right?
So like a social IQ.
Yeah, they change their style as they go along because, you can't build a successful company with just one person. You have to build a team, and you have to take feedback from that team to course correct your vision as the data comes back.
Is that always the case, that you can't build a company with just one person, that you need a team?
I can't think of any significant company that's just one person. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who are one-person companies. Vending machine, someone who has 50 vending machines is a one-person company often, or an ice cream truck or a food truck. But if you really want to scale a company to be, right now, I work for one that has 26,000 employees, right, and we're in almost every country. That takes a lot more than being a one-person band.
I've interviewed in this research a lot of artists and musicians who are effectively one-man or one-woman shows. And in some cases, very profitably. Especially with today's environment of creators online. You don't need much to put yourself out there and generate a huge windfall. But what all of those artists seem to be asking me, as the little bridge here that's interviewing people who have made a living off of this, they don't quite know how to build it into something that can make them money and that lasts.
That's right.
What advice do you have for those people who recognize they want to be original, but also are real about wanting to establish themselves financially?
Durability. I mean, that's what everyone, that's part of scalability is durability, right? Taking a scrape on someone else's work, right? So if you look at Puff Daddy in the music business, right? What he realizes, he was a darn good performer, but he wasn't always going to be a performer. So he said, "What else am I good at?" He said, "Well, I'm good at scouting talent. I'm good at developing talent. I know all the venues and where people should play. I know how to release albums." And he, turned into a producer, and then actually started his own record label and built out from there. And it's not called Puff Daddy Records, right? It's Bad Boy.
Right.
So, I think that's true of a lot of people. You just got to rethink your skill set to broaden it beyond just your name and your individual performance.
You come from a background of PowerPoint presentations.
That's an old school software program, but
Which is really, I'm guessing, about building a story that you can communicate in a way that actually people understand.
That's right.
And when you came up with the vision for Kayak, a huge part of that is going and sharing the story with people. So what are some of the things you started noticing about, and maybe this applies to other areas of fundraising too, that you noticed that you could improve on or that was working well?
Sure. Look, I think all of us are storytellers, right? I mean, that's what we do in our day-to-day lives. Business is no different. And when you're trying to start a company, the story's got to be tight, and it's got to be, it's just like reading a bedtime story to a kid. If they start getting bored,
Right.
you need to change the narrative, right?
Right.
So you just need to read the room and read the body language of the VC. And some VCs don't care about the business idea; they care about the exit. So how much is it going to cost to build this, and how do I get my money back, right? Others are really interested in what's the idea, what are the hurdles for that, how big can it be? Others are like, oh, well, tell me about the team you're building, right? Because I think it's a great idea. I think I can make money off it, but are you the team that's going to get it done, right? So you just need to change your storyline to adjust for that. And it, for me, it's all about self-confidence, projecting that what you're talking about, and that, you pick up on the cues so that you can twist it, and some people actually want to see self-doubt. So with something like that, you say, look, I don't have all the answers, but I know that I'm going to assemble a team that as data comes back and as we see what consumer interest is and partner interest is, we can course correct.
Right. That's powerful.
Yeah. And look, I went to public school in Texas, and then I went to an Ivy League college, and I was woefully unprepared for it, right? And I got really bad grades. But I wasn't that worried about it, because when I got to my job interviews that senior year, the interviewer would ask me, "God, Steve, explain to me your 2.8 average." And in Ivy League, everyone gets out A's. I didn't. And I said, "Well, it's really easy. I didn't come here to school to get graded grades. If I wanted to do that, I wouldn't have had so many extracurriculars. I would not have taken really hard classes outside my area of expertise. I wouldn't have spent so much time with other students broadening my horizons. I did all that instead, and I got 2.8 to show for it, but I'm proud of it."
That's amazing.
And people are like, "Oh, okay, next."
I'm sold.
Yeah, next. But
People are listening to this. That's a great idea. So that was a story that you told.
yeah.
And was that just something that came naturally, shaping a narrative into a story that you could persuade people with?
So look, I think everything can be trained, but we all have our comfort zones. Telling stories for me comes kind of naturally, because I'm a voracious reader. So I love reading stories, right? Less fiction actually than biographical and historical. That's just my jam. But yeah, I like storytelling. But it's just like public speaking. Most people aren't natural public speakers, but you can be trained to do it.
Right. And I like to recommend, like, a lot of people are just terrified at the first thought of ever even sharing the idea.
Yeah.
Ever even saying it. Like, they got this great idea, but they're curled up on their couch, like, never sharing it with the world. And until you step over that first hurdle and say, okay, I'm going to go tell my neighbor about this, or I'm going to go tell my friend about this, it starts to get a little easier. Not to say that it's ever easy getting up in front of people and trying to persuade them, but it is like almost like a joke that you're telling, that you learn like what part hits, right?
Yeah. And look, the world is full of dumb ideas. And the only way to narrow down what's the difference between a dumb idea and a good one is to socialize it.
Is to socialize it.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really interesting. I've never heard that before.
Really? Huh.
To socialize it.
Yeah, because, when you come up with an idea, you're like, well, maybe dumb, but I don't really know until you bounce it off somebody else.
Yeah, give it air.
Give it air, and then
See if it
someone will
grows.
say, oh, you actually might be onto something. Or they may more likely, yeah, that's been tried before, especially if you're talking to VCs.
Right.
That's been tried before, and it failed
Won't
for this
work.
reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to go back and noodle on that, and maybe the first 3 reasons why it failed aren't true anymore. Maybe computing power is a lot cheaper than it was when the idea first came out. Or maybe there's a new programming language. These are tech examples. Maybe there's a new programming language that's a lot more efficient, so I don't need AI researchers to do this. I can actually just use AI and someone who's $40,000 a year to do.
Join our creative business community at HereGoesNothin.com.